Yeah, last night or the night before, Morning Sunrise got third, Morning Arby's, and I usually bet just to show just for fun with, and I kind of debated and didn't bet. Paid $7.20
Really?
to show. $7.20, that's more than some of the win. So I'm just like, yeah, I'll do that today.
Thank you.
Chicken eggs. Double check and see. Okay, welcome to First Universalist of New Madison on this beautiful fall day. We have one door open and one door closed. The fans aren't on, so the temperature is kind of exactly where we want it. And we'll see how long that lasts. Do we have any announcements? Let's see. Crystal was here last week. We had really good attendance. Roberta is called in, is still not feeling well. She was sick last week. We sent her a card and remind me, we'll call her on the phone, just say hi after church today. Crystal will be back next month, and Derek will be back next month. And as we talked about before, Lloyd was at El Dorado, and I think the next time, like April was giving the presentation there, I think my suggestion would be if they're having a guest speaker, I don't think they would object at all if we just kind of trooped over there and kind of joined them for that. Particularly if Lloyd's over there playing, we might as well go ahead and do that. So the reason we didn't last Sunday was because Crystal was here. But for future things, that just take that into your, we'll think about it, and if somebody has an objection, we don't have to do it. But if there's no objection, I think it would be a good sign of solidarity. So
if you decide to go to El Dorado, could you send an email out? I hate to make work for you. I mean, you got enough work as it is.
no, we would definitely, and Mike will, it's in our preparation thing, when he sends out what the worship, he sends out the email blast with the worship.
I don't get that anymore.
You don't get that? Give Mike your.
We'll make sure you're on the list.
Yeah, you should, or give me your thing too, because I've been adding people onto the list. Margaret kind of wants to know what's going on, so I kind of send her, and when the email I send to people that says just what the topic is and the copy of it, I've been sending it to her so she's more aware earlier in the week if she wants to come or not come. I can keep expanding that so you'll know. Some people want to hear one topic and don't want to hear another topic, so they kind of make their choices there. We're trying to please everybody, do as much as we can to please as many people and offend as few people as possible. Sometimes it's not possible to avoid offending people, and that's what we're talking about today. Politics and church. We'll talk about it as we go along. Okay, our prelude is 3 coins in the fountain. saw an interesting review. 3 Coins in a Fountain is a Trivoli fountain in Italy, Rome, Italy. Very popular tourist site. And I saw a review on Facebook of a person who was a little discouraged with Italy, the crowds, the difficulty of getting around. The Italian people, she said, are not the most hospitable of the world. It was kind of an interesting little review, but she went to all the major sites and could barely get close to them. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo. So I would still encourage you, watch Rick Steves. Travel is an enlightening opening thing. But take the good with the bad. There's nothing is ever as perfect as they make it out to be in the movies. So,
Tim, if I may share.
Yes.
The few times I witnessed on my travels to Trevi Fountain and thrown my coins in, I've always wondered, a beautiful building behind it, actually, the building's part, I think, and I've always wondered, was that a palace? Palazzo, I guess is the name of it. Or was it some noble's house, or what was it? Because I've always wondered. And I thought, well, I'll never know. I never looked it up. I stumbled on something that just flashed up on the internet about 3 days ago. And it answered my very question. It even had pictures of this building behind it. And it's basically full of hallways and hydraulic areas, hydraulic piping.
Oh, for the fountain?
So I don't know how, I mean, it's a historic building because they brought it, the original water with them, up with them.
Right.
But it's basically just hallways. It looks like infrastructure to maybe plumbing. So questions answered and a timely topic.
And curiosity, it didn't just kill the cat, it like makes life worthwhile. So anybody that has pictures of a visit or a travel, you visited national parks or Italy or any place, feel free to bring those in. If you want to speak on it, we can. If you don't want to speak on it, we'll just put the pictures up and show people. Because I still agree with Rick that travel is the most broadening, enlightening, educational thing you can do.
Mark Twain.
Yeah, Mark Twain. We want to encourage people to have an open mind, which is more again kind of what we're doing here. So, okay, chalice lighting, our sacred hope for the world. The chalice we light today is a symbol of our faith. It binds us together as one people, as a reminder that our strength is in our shared hope for the world, and that our common work is the creation of a beloved community among ourselves and in the world. Our opening hymn is 114, Forward Through the Ages. And as UUs, we move forward through the ages, but yet the choice of whether it's at the call divine or on your own call is up to you. Okay, our affirmation. Crystal did the one we used to do, and I'd kind of like that, so I'm not going to do it all the time, but we'll start doing it a little more often. We pray for our country's leaders. May they lead with justice and fairness on their lips. May they hold in highest esteem the value of human life and liberty. May they never forget who elected them, nor those who did not. Many of us are worried, anxious, and afraid. Who will uphold our basic human rights? Who will protect us from rollbacks on liberty? Who will lead us through the shadows? Who will remember us? Spirit of life and love, holy presence all around, embrace us with your wisdom and peace. Surround us with reassurance. Fill our hearts with purpose. Empower us to do what is right. May our hearts be expanded as the time comes for us to comfort each other. May our minds be charged with creativity as we find our way forward. May our bodies remain well so we can travel to our state capitals or the line at the abortion clinic to escort someone to safety. May our spirits be guided by our values. May our lives speak, be they gentle or angry or loud and clear. May we remain united in our mission as people of faith to connect deeply, grow together, and serve one another. Blessed be, may it be so. Amen. And our standard affirmation, if you want to join with me, love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human needs, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Two different kinds of words in both of those affirmations, but they have the same content. They have the same heart, the same soul, the same feeling. So let us continue to embrace those. Okay, joys and concerns. Roberta, I think top of the list. You know, as you get older, it gets harder to jump back from some of these things. And none of us will deny that we're getting older. So remind me, we'll call Roberta after church to see how she's doing. And we'll call Cecil and see how she's doing. Anything else? Yes?
I got a joy. I told these two gentlemen over here, is our son and daughter-in-law came from Washington State, and we went to see my father-in-law, who was bedridden. If you knew him beforehand, he was always sawing, pounding nails, and building and now he's completely bedridden. But we wanted him to see, talk to him, his grandfather. And then they took the other car, and they're up in Michigan now. We're trying to convince them that maybe moving from Washington to Michigan is a good thing. And they live kind of off the grid. And we absolutely positive they can do that there in Michigan. So, and with our daughter talking about moving to Michigan, it would be nice to have everybody close by. So it's a joy.
Be nice to have family together. And if anybody knows anything about the Upers, you can live way off the grid if you want to go to the Upper Peninsula. That's not necessary, though. There are lots of state forests and national forests in northern Michigan. So there's plenty of territory there, plenty of space there. So. And Michigan, politically, I think it used to be on a par with Washington. Then it kind of trended to the right quite a bit, but I think maybe it's kind of centering back toward the middle a little bit more, a little more comfortable for people. So we'll see how that works. But
there's pockets of pretty liberal areas there in Michigan, and we do look for that. There's something you can look on. If you're looking for an area, it's called Best Places. And it'll go through, and of the number of things that it'll list, it'll say politics.
Yeah.
And so we look for, and we try to find something that's more than 50% Democrat. I used to vote split ticket many years ago, but no more. And however, if you compare something that's like maybe 36%, where we live, it's 18%. So I mean,
But it's where we live is, and that you're living farther north, but even in Mercer County, I go to the Democratic meeting every month in Greenville. And anybody that's interested in that, give me your email address and I'll put you on the mailing list. It doesn't mean you have to contribute. It doesn't mean you're a member. It just means you get the information the Democratic Party in Darke County sends out. They started a new Democratic women's group, and I probably think men could come if they wanted to, but it's primarily for women. And it's Democrats and independents. It's not specifically for Democrats, but it's an educational group, a support group, because we found working at the fair booth at Darke County Fair with the Democratic booth, there are a lot of people who, because all their neighbors, everybody they know, everybody they work with is a rock-ribbed Republican and not very affirming or accepting of anybody with a different opinion or a different idea. They kind of keep their light hidden under a bushel, but they are looking for support. I think there's more Democratic thought in Darke County than people actually are aware of. So we had quite a few people stop in and pick up the address of the women's group, and I'll put that on the bulletin board sometime. And that's just another email thing. They started out with like 5 members. At the meeting a couple months ago, they had 40, and now they're up over 150. So that's pretty incredible. Now, it's not just limited to Darke County, because anybody can join from any county. So Mercer County, Miami County, Montgomery County, anybody is more than welcome to be part of the group. I think they have meetings on a monthly basis, but you don't have to go to the meetings. You can basically just keep in touch through the Facebook group. Okay. Yeah, we have the Ukraine, we have our sunflowers. The sunflower plant that I have here, I put outside, it was looking pretty bedraggled. A bunch of new sunflowers have popped out again on it. So kind of like the Ukraine, when things look terrible and you think everything is never gonna work, it kind of refreshes. They're not big giant sunflowers, they're little teeny ones, even smaller than these, but regrowth is still possible. The reason I bring it up today is there is a definite threat to the Ukraine now, but it doesn't come from the Russians. It comes from another R group. The bill to fund the government passed yesterday, passed in the House, and it also passed in the Senate. But it passed without any money support for the Ukraine. The support the United States gives is the majority of the funding they get and the majority of the material they get, and without funding for the United States and material for the United States, they would succumb to the Russian onslaught in no time at all. It is a small select group of Republicans who prevented that from happening and who do not want us to support the Ukraine. They are reciting the standard America First from the World War I and World War II, which would have let the Germans or the Nazis, basically take over the world. These people, in my opinion, are short-sighted. If you don't stop them where they are now, they continue to, just like Hitler did, when they gave him the Sudetenland and gave him Czechoslovakia, he just continued to roll across, feeling in his own mind that he could not be stopped when he invaded Poland. And that will happen again. History tends to repeat itself. So, Ukraine is still in our thoughts and prayers. The plant that I brought in is a bougainvillea. That's one of these I have at home and I buy every year, and then I somehow I kill it every winter. But they're really, there's a tropical vine, so they have to stay warm, but they're really beautiful to watch, and they really go crazy if you give them something to grow on.
Tim, another joy, if we could extend that, the joy of extending our authority, as you just mentioned, through November, up to and through, I think, November 17. And so that joy comes to the fact that, for me, it reflects some of those democratic principles we used to be so proud of, called compromise. Despite the duress in which that bill was passed yesterday, it did represent some compromise, which I see as a glimmer of hope. It's obviously going to have repercussions, which is back into not governance, but politics. But I was glad to see that happen. And as you mentioned, there were opposition to that, and some of that opposition represents our very area here. But I won't go any further with that.
Feel free.
Voting no on that measure and failing to compromise, despite the majority of actually compromising yesterday.
And maybe we should light a candle, or I am lighting a candle, for the Speaker of the House, who basically defied the conservative Republicans They threatened his job. They say they are going to displace him from Speaker of the House because he offered a compromise. In the passage of that bill, there were actually more Democrats voted for the bill than Republicans, but it was a combined group that had to pass it. The question I heard raised by the commentators was, if they oust that Speaker of the House, who has the votes to become the next Speaker of the House? And because there is not a unanimity in the Republican Party, he may retain his job because no one else would be able to do it any better than he's doing it. So interesting times. I think that was considered a Chinese curse, is to live in interesting times.
Sometimes it seems that the repercussions are more important than the legislation, pending legislation and policy thereafter. That's a sad commentary.
Yes, a sad comment.
But I wanted to bring up a joy, so I'll stay on that note.
Yep, I agree. Okay, Kenny is traveling to the Veterans World War II Memorial, traveling by bus. That's a pretty long bus ride. And none of these people are spring chickens either. And as you know, sitting in a bus seat for 10, 12 hours is not I'm sure they have bus stops, but that's not a pleasant thing to do. But I'm sure he is really enjoying the comradeship and the support that he's receiving all the way along. And we want to continue that too. And we miss him because he's not moving the camera. So, anything else? All right, we'll light a final candle for those hopes and joys, those thoughts, those fears, those tragedies that may not even be aware of yet. If anyone needs help, if you need help, please contact us, and we will do what we can. Okay, children's story. We'll see if it'll play today.
You're in a conversation about religion and politics, and someone says churches shouldn't get involved in political issues. What would you say? Politics can be dirty, but the church should be holy. So a lot of people believe that churches should avoid political issues. Sometimes the intention is to help the church avoid compromising situations. Other times, this is said in an attempt to keep the church out of the public square. But is it biblical? The next time you hear someone say that churches should avoid political issues, here are 3 things to remember. First, there's no such thing as a political issue. There are economic issues, environmental issues, criminal justice issues, educational issues, and transportation issues. But there are no political issues. Why? Because politics is not a category of issues. Politics is a process. The political process can be used to work through any issue as we attempt to order our lives together. What side of the road should we drive on? What's the definition of marriage? The fact that an issue is being debated in a political process should not determine whether Christians should care about it. Which leads to the second point. Second, if God cares about an issue, we should care about it too. The Bible doesn't speak to which side of the road we should go, but it does have a lot to say about marriage and the value of each life. For Christians, the critical question is not, is this political or not, but does God care? When He cares, we should care. That's what we signed up for. Besides, churches that claim to avoid political issues rarely do so consistently. Many avoid cultural hot potatoes like homosexuality or the definition of marriage, but speak loudly on issues like racial injustice and human trafficking, as they should. God cares about them all. But selective engagement suggests that our real concern is not about political involvement, but about offending cultural sensitivities. Which leads to the third point. Third, the choice to avoid political issues is itself a political decision. When churches selectively decide which biblical issues they will speak about based on expected reactions, they're doing the most political thing possible. They're telling people what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. Churches don't represent themselves. They represent Jesus. We shouldn't speak or engage because we're angry, and we should never be encouraged. But avoiding conflict is not the example Jesus gave. Let's review. Next time someone tells you churches shouldn't get involved in political issues, remember, there's no such thing as a political issue. Politics is simply a process. Second, if God cares, we should care. That's what it means to be a Christian. And third, avoiding political issues is a political decision. Doing what is popular is political. Doing what is right is biblical. If you like this video, let us know.
Doing what is popular versus doing what is right. One is political and one is religious. That's what we want to remember. Any comments on his interpretation? Basically, you can find in the Bible, and you can say anything is biblical, and each side will find support in the Bible for their position. That's what makes the Bible an interesting piece of literature, and that's what makes a political process or a political discussion an interesting discussion. Those who condemn will find support, and those who support will find support. And it just depends on where you're picking and choosing from what you're doing. The reason I'm bringing this up, the reason we're talking about today is last week, as you know, I encouraged people to be aware of issue 1, which we voted no on. Issue 1, the amendment to the Ohio Constitution, would have raised the passage rate for an amendment to the Constitution to 60.1%. It would have had the documents be filed in all 88 counties. It would have had to have sponsorship from all 88 Ohio counties. That basically would have said that there would be no more amendments to the Ohio Constitution. 60% is almost impossible to achieve in a divided state. And 88 counties supporting an issue is absolutely impossible in a state like Ohio. Some of the more smaller counties with a less population, just the education alone would be impossible to do. The staffing, the money it would take to go to those small counties would not happen. So that issue was defeated. Now the Amendment 1 is on the ballot for November. That's coming up in the next month. That is the amendment that says the women's choice will be allowed and supported in the state of Ohio. And it's not just women's choice, it is also the choice to have birth control will be enshrined in the Constitution. Maybe some people aren't aware of that there are people in Ohio who say that life begins at conception, and conception means when the sperm meets the egg. And so anything that interferes with the sperm meeting the egg is considered to be interfering with conception and interfering with life. So a lot of the birth control methods do not let the zygote, the implanted egg, implant on the wall of the uterus, and the egg is flushed out. That's how you avoid pregnancy. But that is a fertilized egg, which according to some people is a human being. So the right to contraception is there. The right to treatment for UTIs, for diseases which can cause problems with pregnancy. In places like Texas and Alabama, Florida, it's getting hard for women to get medical treatment because the doctors are afraid of being sued and losing their licenses and actually having criminal penalties for interfering with the pregnancy, even if they're treating some other disease. In other words, if they're treating cancer or treating a bladder infection and it interferes with the pregnancy, they can be brought before the law for that interference. It's crazy, basically. And there's actually 5 things, which I don't remember all of them right now, but there's 5 things that are enshrined. And you're going to have to read the entire amendment because the Ohio legislature changed the wording, and all it says is pregnancy. It doesn't say anything about the other 4, like birth control. It doesn't say anything about that. The other thing the Ohio legislature did and the Ohio Supreme Court approved was instead of referring to a zygote or a fertilized egg, they call it an unborn child. That's basically loading with a word that's freighted with a lot more meaning. When you say unborn child for a 1-day-old zygote, that's a big difference. So anyway, what we're talking about is education, and education is allowed in, let me read you what the law is. Well, first of all, what does faithful political discipleship look like? What does faithful political discipleship look like? What should religious people or moral or ethical people, what should their actions be like? And is there a difference between being political and being partisan? If you watch the presentation on the film, there's a political process, and that is different than being partisan. Partisan means you support one side and one side only to the detriment of the other side. The political process is a side that includes everybody. That's where the law of coming together from both perspectives and trying to hammer out a compromise comes from. So currently, the law prohibits political campaign activity by charities and churches, defining a 501c3, which is what we are, a nonprofit. We are filed as a nonprofit organization, as one which does not participate in or intervene in, including the publishing or distributing of statements, any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for public office. Any candidate for public office cannot be supported or opposed by a nonprofit church. The IRS has published Revenue Ruling 2007-41 PDF, which outlines how churches and all 501(c)(3) organizations can stay within the law regarding the ban on political activity. Also, the ban by Congress on political campaign activity regarding a candidate, churches and other organizations can engage in a limited amount of lobbying, including ballot measures, and advocate for or against issues that are in the political arena. Let me repeat that. Churches and charities cannot propagandize, cannot support or oppose candidates, but they are allowed to support or oppose issues. This is what we were doing, this is what I was doing last week, was trying to educate people on issues. That's the reason that I brought up the yard sign, which I have available for anybody that wants a yard sign, supporting yes in favor of issue 1. And that is the difficulty. Last election, vote no on issue 1. This election, vote yes on issue 1. People have to flip that in their heads because they've heard that propaganda and that education for months and months to vote no. And when they see issue 1, they're going to have to change their minds and start voting yes. But issue 1 is an issue. That's why it's called issue 1. It's not a candidate. Churches are allowed to educate. They are allowed to support or oppose. The Catholic Church on issue 1 last election that the Catholic Church opposed or supported issue 1, which would have limited abortion in the state of Ohio, spent $2.5 million on that TV and radio campaign. The Catholic Church in Ohio, the Cincinnati Diocese, the Columbus Diocese, and the Cleveland Diocese, between the three of them, contributed $1.5 million to a TV and radio campaign to support issue 1. So anybody who thinks that we can't be involved in politics is mistaken.
Now, is that the law? Is that a legal ruling? Or is it an IRS ruling?
That's an IRS ruling.
Okay, so that's not congressional, it's not in the law.
Yeah, and that's where we get into trouble is because...
Yeah, because the IRS has only authority on, obviously, it collects taxes,
right,
and then obviously it interprets tax law, which occupies volumes. But it's interesting, if that's not a court ruling, or if it's not constitutionally based, it's interesting what the take on that is. But I think your example, particularly with the Catholic Church, and it was an issue versus a candidate, but that's basically coming out of IRS.
And we've seen what's happened with the previous administration. Government entities that try to pass regulations, the EPA, the Health Department, anything else, the conservatives in Congress are saying, you're not allowed to do that. We're going to limit your ability to make laws or to make rulings that apply to everybody. The Health Department tried to say everybody should wear a mask. They encouraged everybody to wear a mask. Congress passed all kinds of little rulings and saying you don't have to wear a mask. Some states and counties and cities have actually passed regulations not allowing people to, in other words, if you have a store and you say everybody has to wear a mask when they come in your store, they've passed a regulation that says you cannot do that. The same way with gun control. The states and some federal agencies have tried to say you cannot carry a gun into a church. Now some localities, states, and counties have said you cannot stop people from carrying a gun wherever they want. They can take a gun into a bar. They can take a gun into a church. Where is the only place you can't take a gun?
Probably the Ohio Legislature chamber.
Any place the people that make the laws and want to be safe, any place they are, you can't take a gun. Any place anybody else is, no matter how drunk or angry or anything else you are, you're more than welcome to take your gun along. Just parenthetically, how many people saw that? I think I told you about this before, the guy who was helping deer cross the traffic in the state of Washington. When some guy drove by, rolled his window down and shot him and killed him. He thought he was being threatened because the guy was standing out in the middle of traffic saying, slow down, there's deer coming across here. That's the kind of thing that's happening now. And we could cite example after example. Some high school kid goes up and knocks on the wrong door, and the person on the inside shoots them and kills them through the door because they were afraid for their life. So, I digress. The IRS has also provided guidance regarding the difference between advocating for a candidate and advocating for legislation. See political and lobbying activities. In other words, you cannot lobby for a candidate, but you can lobby for legislation, which means any issue that's on the ballot, you can say yes or no. So we as a church have the right to do that. What's the problem with that? This is what happens in many churches. There has to be respect for community members, the people in the church. There cannot be any absolute rules. Well, let me take that back. If you're in a fundamentalist church, of which there are many, which everybody has to have the same opinion, and the Catholic Church is an example of one where the Pope tells you what to believe and that's what you believe. You can still go to the Catholic Church, and as long as you don't make your beliefs public, you can still have Mass. I go to Mass and you can still receive communion. But if you saw many times, in fact, even I think Cincinnati was one of them, the Archbishop or whoever was in charge tried to deny communion to certain members of the legislature because they supported a woman's choice, even though they were faithful Catholics. Joe Biden is a faithful Catholic, and certain people have advocated that he should not receive communion because he does not follow in a strict guideline all of the church's recommendations. That's where the rubber meets the road as far as religion and personal faith and personal belief. And that has happened here too. So, what we advocate as UUs is everybody is to be accommodated as much as possible. If somebody objects to seeing the little yard sign that I brought up, I took the yard sign back and will not bring it to the front. But I will not say that we're not going to educate people about what these issues mean. That is not being political in church, that is being part of the political process. Education, everybody should know what they're voting for, so education is paramount. Education is critical to what we are doing as a church. And you know what my position is. I don't have to say it, but what we do have to say is what the issue stands for. And if you want to be religious, which this is going to be a little more religious than some of the UU presentations as we go along here. So, UUs are a liberal church. I mean, we are defined as a liberal church. We support LGBTQ. We support women's rights. So I don't think anybody can come in and say we are abrogating the rights of conservatives, but they know where we stand. But we are open to all opinions. We're open to all debates. If anybody wants to bring an opposing opinion, they are more than welcome to come up and make a presentation here. I'll even get slides for you. Any position you want to, other than something that's illegal or totally immoral, and I guess we have to debate what immoral is welcome to make a presentation. In fact, I would encourage them to make a presentation because the more different aspects of people we get here, the more people we have making presentations, the more of an audience we create. Crystal was here and we had more people in attendance because of the people Crystal brought with her than we've had in weeks. So I want to encourage anybody who wants to make a presentation to do that. Part of the problem we're getting into with the political process is things like words like kindness, which you would think would be more than welcomed in church, is now becoming kind of a totem. It's becoming a thing that people point out and say that means you're woke. If you talk about kindness in church, you're expressing being woke. That's wokeness. And there is a giant opposition to wokeness, which all of us understand, us old people who went through the whole 60s and 70s, when education of people on what was the correct way to behave, being polite, being accepting, being open-minded, that's now called being woke. And discriminating against people is now considered an acceptable behavior. So that puts church in the middle. And part of that wokeness thing is an expression of control. It's what I call control through intimidation. They threaten people with being woke. They threaten people with being too liberal. And they don't want to hear anything that's not on their side of the street. We had an experience here a few years ago when we had a large group of people who were pagans. And we welcome pagans. We welcome their expression. We welcome their presentation and worship. But then the pagans said that we could not have Christmas music except one Sunday a year on Christmas. We welcome pagans, and we welcome anyone who wants to express their beliefs with us, but what we don't welcome is anybody else telling us or telling anybody else, any other group, what they cannot or can do. Everybody is welcome. We decide by community decision, by group decision, what's acceptable and what's not. We had a trial preacher here who used some language that wasn't really usually considered acceptable in church. I'm not sure. He's a really interesting guy, Phil is. He's in the Richmond Civic Theater, and he's working in a church in Indiana. Has been for months or for years. But I don't know if he wanted to make a splash or wanted to make it memorable in people's minds, but it was memorable, and it was memorable in a not so positive way. So the invitation for Phil to be here on a permanent basis kind of disappeared with that. So we will kind of get into that today, because I have a joke for you at the end of the service, which has a little bit of language that's not considered acceptable. I don't think it's marginal, so I don't think you'll mind, but we'll see. So anyway, religious leaders who speak out can be persecuted. We talked about Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Germany before. He was a religious leader who spoke out against Nazism and the German regime. He was put in prison and basically executed before the end of the war for his religious beliefs. So it is not simply voicing an opinion. Sometimes your life is on the line when you try to uphold the Christian principles or the ideas of liberality. Okay, now I want to go to Matthew 20:1 through 16. I think the Bible's in the pews if you want to read along, but I'm going to read it to you. This is something that Tara did at New Carlisle, and I always watch her. I don't watch the whole service, but I watch her sermons, and I was really impressed by this, and I think it's something that we can learn from as well. The parable of the workers in the vineyard. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius, which is the Roman coin that was used in Palestine and Judea, for the day, and sent them into the vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." And so they went. He went out again at noon, and about 3 in the afternoon, and did the same thing at 6. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found others still standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came, and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. You suppose the union workers would have struck? When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. Those who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. What did he answer them? I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who is hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want to do with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last. How many times have you heard that? The last will be first, and the first will be last. Did you ever know what that meant? And you know what this parable is about? About accepting the kingdom of heaven. Those who have been faithful their entire life are accepted into heaven. Those who have a deathbed conversion are accepted into heaven. Is there any difference between the two? Is one more loyal or just or more deserving than the other? It's a hard concept to wrap your head around. That is some of the same things that go on with politics in church. What is more acceptable? What is, if you want to put it as the Lord's, the right thing to do in the Lord's view, or the right thing to do in Christ's view, or the right thing to do in Confucius's view, or the right thing to do in Buddha's view, or the right thing to do in your conscience. It can all be the same thing. It doesn't matter where it comes from. So this is the quote that she gave at the end, which I was impressed by. Justice is when you get what you deserve. Justice is when you get what you deserve. Mercy is when you don't get what you deserve. Mercy is when you don't get what you deserve. And grace is what you get that you don't deserve. Grace is when you get what you don't deserve. Justice, mercy, and grace. Okay, that's all I have. Questions, comments? Justice, mercy, and grace. Does anyone like having like a spiritual or a scriptural background? Does anyone like having comments made on the Bible? Or do you want to have, yes?
Sounds good to me. You can be dastardly your whole life and then declare, oh, I want to go to heaven.
It's not fair, is it?
Sounds good.
But what did Christ say? And what does God say? Do you suppose there's tears in heaven? If you've been faithful your whole life, you get the golden throne and the golden streets and wine and good food. And if you converted on your deathbed, you have to sleep in a hut. Or can you work your way up? We can discuss sometime grace. If you look at some of the different churches in the Catholic Church, the early Catholic Church, what inspired the Reformation was that you could buy your way into heaven. If you had sinned your entire life, you could do what is called an indulgence. You could give the priest money, and the more money you gave him, the more expiation or the more relief you got from your sins. You could buy your way into heaven with money. Luther said that's a piece of crap. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. And then the Protestants came along and said, we believe in hard work. We believe in making money, and we believe in hard work to make money. So we also believe in, how do you get in heaven? Through good works. If you do good things in your life, you get in heaven. If you do bad things, if you're an evil person, you don't get in heaven. It doesn't matter how much money you give to the church. But then other people said, belief is all you have to do. It does not depend on good works. So we can talk about that. There's a real confrontation, a real disagreement on works versus faith. So, Let me do and this is the one little quote that I really liked. My religion divided by your religion equals war. My religion divided by your religion equals war. And this is just justice is what you get, when you get what you deserve. Mercy is when you don't get what you deserve. And grace is when you get what you don't deserve. And let me do this one now. Anybody, just by looking at that, see what it is?
Yeah.
There was an argument between a Christian and an atheist. And the Christian was telling the atheist about the belief in God, and the atheist was saying he didn't believe in God. And the Christian said, can you answer this question for me? Can you answer the question, these three animals all eat grass. Deer eat grass, cows eat grass, and horses eat grass. Can you answer for me why what they excrete is so much different? Deer excrete little pellets, little tiny pellets, all of them formed. Cows excrete a big floppy, gooey, drippy mess that just slides all over the place. Horses excrete what is called, what I like to call horse apples. When you see them on the highway, they're little round balls about the size of a tennis ball, and they're pretty formed and they stay together pretty good. They're not hard like deer pellets, because when you step on them, they'll smash out. So the Christian said, can you explain to me why you don't believe in God, and can you explain to me why all three animals eat the same food, but their excrement is all different? And the atheist said, no, I can't do that. And then the Christian said, so you, who don't know shit, are trying to tell me what is the truth about God. So there you go. Okay, any other comments?
I think it has more to do with anatomy and physiology.
Yes.
He is a former biology teacher.
And it has to do more with the grass too. If the grass has a lot of fluid in it, it's like new fresh grass, you'll get cows. Deers eat a lot of browse. Deer eat a lot of twigs and leaves and things that are dry. So that gives them, and it dries it out more. And horses eat a lot more hay and dry grass. Has a lot more bulk to the diet. Also, it has to do with anatomy. Cows have 3 stomachs, and they process the food different. So, I mean, there's reasons for it, but the joke still lies in the answer. So that was my little attempt at humor. Okay, any other questions, comments? Anybody that wants to contribute jokes, that's always more than welcome to. All right, we are going to do the offering. Try to remember. If you have something to contribute, please do. If you need something, please feel free to take something. as we heard the music for the offering, try to remember why you are in church. Try to remember your community. Try to remember those people who are so often forgotten. All right, our closing hymn is 113, Where is Our Holy Church? Another effective kind of little reminder for us. Unite as equal persons in the search for beauty, truth, and right. Words to live by. All right, our extinguishing the chalice is keep the chalice flame burning. Be kind, be brave, be just, be merciful, and be hopeful. This is how we keep the chalice flame burning until we are together again to light it anew. And we're going to hear for our postlude a Ashokan farewell. It's the theme from Ken Burns' Civil War epic. If you saw that on PBS, that's a pretty amazing presentation too. evocative tune. If you saw the Ken Burns Civil War, lots of letters from soldiers who died or were gravely wounded. Really, it touches your heartstrings. All right, that's the end of the service. We'll see you hopefully next week. If you have any problems or need anything, please let us know. If you're available to help, let us know.
What's this?
Bougainvillea.
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 If you heard from Bougainville in the Philippines, it's a tropical plant, vining plant.
Good job, Lloyd.
It goes crazy in warm weather, but it doesn't seem to overwinter very good in my house.
Beautiful.
Yeah, they have them in red and white.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
We'll take a picture of it there.